And it just shows essentially that same $100,000 going back over 20 years. If you stayed in the market every day, and it's 635,000. But if you just missed the best 20 days, or you're all the way down to 174,000. So
Other questions?
I had one, and I guess we could have brought it up a little bit during the fixed income thing, but I think it's come up more and more over the last year, and it's with rates where they're at 5%. Why don't I just pull my money out and put it in a money market or a CD and collect 5%? I don't have to worry about the markets. I don't have to worry about the uncertainty, and I just collect 5%. That sounds like a pretty good idea, right?
But Kyle, what if rates go down?
Well, they're locking it up, right? We can do it for 30 years if you want, but it goes back to what we were talking about too. It's a combination of things. One, usually if we're doing planning, most clients cannot plan to return 5% on their entire nest egg for the rest of their life and outpace inflation and spending, right? And so there has to be other components to the portfolio. So that's one. Two, it's when to get in and out, right? So rates are at 5, so I'm going to get out of the market. I'm going to go into 5% money market, CDs, treasuries, whatever it may be. Well, then when rates go down, I'm going back into the market. Well, the market's probably appreciated. So now we're buying back in at a higher price too. And then just kind of, I got a little slide here that I'll pull up here with kind of inflation adjusted returns, right? And so as you can see here, both over a 2023, you have your cash in a mattress or coffee can, whatever you want to put it, your T-bill, bonds, and then stocks. And just over the course of 2023 for a year, the inflation adjusted of $100,000, you can see a significant difference between stocks and even bonds versus your cash in the mattress and the T-bill. But if you expanded that over 30-year period, your cash is your $100,000 is worth roughly $47,000, and that's just based on inflation that we already talked about. And then your bonds, yes, you had positive returns of $55,000 over that period, but again, may not be enough. And then you look at what the stock market is over $866,000. So again, not putting everything in the stock market, but having a plan, having diversified. And then the other part of this is it goes back to the time in the market situation that we talked about over time, right? So staying invested is an important part of investing and part of our planning. And that's, we joked, I know me and Jason have talked about it, and I think you mentioned on some of these podcasts, is it's our job to try to manage clients and keep clients invested, not bouncing or running the second there's a little bit of spike in the market. And this just shows essentially,
because you get rewarded.
Right. So timing the market's really hard.
Yeah.
The more time you have, the better off you are. But if you're asking me what's going to happen today versus tomorrow, it's a lot harder to predict. And it just shows essentially that same $100,000 going back over 20 years. If you stayed in the market every day, and it's 635,000. But if you just missed the best 20 days, or you're all the way down to 174,000. And so the point is, getting into something that's paying cash now sounds good. It's free or easy money if you think, but that's not always going to be the option, and you still have the potential of how much you're missing out on or leaving. And so again, depends on the situation of the plan, and cash, T-bills, CDs, stuff like that makes sense for portions of money or for certain people, certain situations. But that being, again, the one tool that you're going to use, it's probably not the best solution for majority of clients for majority of their assets.
And again, remember what you're trying to do, whether you're putting money into a 401k or whatever. The primary thing you have to do is to make sure that that dollar that you put in will at least get you $1 worth of goods in the future. So, which is to say, you got to beat inflation, and there's almost zero chance you're going to beat inflation being in cash or treasury bonds. Now, you might beat the market going down. You might beat a couple things. Over time, you're not going to beat inflation. You can't do it, and so. You get back to, well, what's the best way to beat inflation? If you look at that chart, look at anything, who do you pay your higher prices to? You're paying those typically to Fortune 500 companies. Yeah. So as their profits go up, how do you attach yourself to those profits? Oh, you own stocks. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the stocks are probably the only way to beat inflation. Now you could say,
what about Bitcoin?
Bitcoin for sure. There's no question.
Sometimes
that was a huge inflation hedge over the last, but you can talk about, people talk about farmland, they talk about timber, but those are really hard to access. It's really easy to access the stock market. It's very cheap, and that's the way traditionally to beat inflation. You just can't do it in cash.
Well, and the important thing is showing those slides is those are 20 years and 30 years, right? So everybody understands inflation today, right? It's been front and center for the last 2 years.
Sure.
6, 7, 8, 9% at one point, and now we're back down to 3.
When's the last time they reduced the price of stamps? I mean, that's an easy one for people to understand.
Eggs,
Stamps.
bread,
Yep.
milk.
Well, I think we've said this before, but like you go back to like you're talking about in the 80s, you had 15% Treasury bonds, and nobody bought them.
Yep.
Because you were afraid that inflation would go to 30. You have massive inflation, and so Kyle's talking about, we talked about earlier that you could get 4.3%, right, in Treasuries all the way out to 30 years. It probably makes sense if you want to lock up some return, 4% for some period of time. But if you did, let's just say you put all your money in a 30-year Treasury bond for 4.3%, which you may think is enough, right? Hey, if I can get 4%, that's great. But what if inflation goes back up? Now that 4% doesn't feel like 4%, and you've locked yourself in, and you can't get out because the price of that bond goes way down. It's not like you can just jump right back out. So
it's a big assumption too that the government's going to stop printing money. I mean, 'cause that's basically what has to happen.
right.
I don't,
It doesn't show any signs yet.
I don't think that's happening. Too close to the printing press.